by way of explanation, when Mark said he was looking for stories on the theme of music, I immediately had the idea that it should be about a couple of people discussing the merits of Beethoven and Bruckner on a spaceship, as you do. But in fact, it goes back beyond that. A couple of years ago, I was writing a book about Gnosticism, which is just out in paperback. It's called The Gnostics, the First Christian Heretics, and I've forgotten to bring any to sell. But this, obviously, the evening is given over to Music from Another World, so good job I forgot them. But I came across some really interesting stuff written by the 3rd century prophet Mani, who now plays bass for Primal Scream, I believe. It was stuff like Jesus dug a river in the cosmos, and Jesus looked into a mirror and saw the universe, and according to Manichaean cosmology, when you die, you go to the moon, which is described as a ship of death, and then you get taken to the sun, which is a ship of light, and your soul is purified, and then you're taken off to the highest heaven, which is beyond the material universe. So, and I thought, well, this sounds like space opera, although it was written 1700 years ago by a man who was put to death in a prison cell in Babylon for his naughtiness. So that and the Beethoven and the Bruckner sort of, they have to go together somehow. And I've just been reading The Haunted Woman by David Lindsay, the great Anglo-Scottish Gnostic, Voyage to Arcturus fame. And in The Haunted Woman, he talks about Beethoven's Seventh as being one of the most profound philosophical statements ever recorded. So you've got a character playing Beethoven's Seventh throughout that book, actually. So all of that came together, and then I was surprised a little bit by early Pink Floyd. They sort of crept in, I don't know why. So I wanted to sort of present some of these Gnostic ideas in a kind of an exciting format, and because Christian heresy isn't everyone's cup of tea, I thought, well, I'd better make the story a bit of an everything and the kitchen sink sort of crazy story on a spaceship with sex, drugs, rock and roll, violence, and sort of, mysticism, as you do. But given that the Manichaeans and Gnostics generally were sort of the first great intellectual dissidents, I thought they would have approved of, that sort of thing. That's one of the reasons why I admire them, really, is their refusenic stance. They were sort of the first punks, in a way. So, anyway, I'm going to read 2 sections. I'm sorry for that. That was a bit of a long preamble, but I will read the beginning and then a bit probably in the middle. And if anybody spots the David Lindsay homages, I'll buy them a drink. I was in the front room of Prolands in Hampstead. St Andrews abided under an imminent dusk. Dark birds circled its spire. Beyond the church, I could see a stand of beech trees gently shed their golden leaves onto the banks of the bathing pond. Governesses hurried children homeward for tea and cake, and then came that unmistakable hum. I searched the massing clouds and then saw them, a wave of zeppelins coming in from the south. I reached for the opium. Captain Dudley came into the room then. James, we're under attack. We must start the ritual now, he said, and then nodded toward the opium pipe. Do you mind? Not at all, I said. I handed him the opium pipe and he inhaled. He handed it back to me. I got a good lungful. The room was becoming vague, although the prospect of imminent bombardment kept me lucid. Dudley went to the gramophone and put on the recording of Hans Richter conducting Bruckner's Eighth. I squinted through the brass telescope that sat on a tripod near the window. The Zeppelins loomed nearer as the first scratchy bars of the Bruckner made themselves present in the room. I could make out markings on their sides, numbers and black crosses. The apocalyptic symphony, Dudley said. I think it's appropriate, given our situation. I looked at him and nodded. Are you ready? I think so, I replied, feeling uncomfortably amorphous from the drug. The opium helped in the rituals, especially at times of emergency like this, when we had no time to get into the right mindset through meditation and breathing exercises. Drugs were the necessary shortcut. Dudley handed me a circlet of jewelled, battered gold, dull gold. We nicknamed it the Crown of Lights, the slightly sinister thing of unknown provenance. Stories varied as to who had originally acquired it. Looted from a monastery in Tibet by young husband, or found in a flea market in Cairo by Aleister Crowley, and then accorded high ritual status. It didn't matter, it's what we've always used. and it had acquired its own mystique over the years. I placed it on my head and got down on my knees before Dudley. My father, yesterday you promised that you would bring my mind into the 8th and afterwards into the 9th. You said that is the way of tradition. And they then begin a ritual, which is a real Gnostic ritual called the Discourse on the 8th and the 9th. I'll gloss over. The Bruckner was slowly building. In all my years of training, this was the most difficult movement to get over, especially in Richter's version. I'd heard legends of him conducting at the Royal Albert Hall, where people were so overcome by the music, they were weeping and staggered out into Kensington's night air, their very selves annihilated. I wanted that. I wanted annihilation, anything to get me out of this world, out of existence. Dudley was cut short by an explosion. It shook the room, and we were flung across the floor like dolls. The cabin pressure alarm started to wail. Another bell rang from somewhere in the corridor outside. Looking up, I could see the windows flickering like a silent movie screen. Hampstead's green and pleasant land, and the Zeppelins were replaced by an intense whiteout, from which emerged the image of a silver and black ship, a lean intergalactic sprinter. Fuck, I whispered. It was the Dominica, our doppelganger, our dark, obsessive twin. She had caught up with us at last and was greeting us with cannon fire. There was a pressure blast. The noise went to the inside of my brain. I covered my ears. Blood flowed from my eyes and my head like it felt like it was compressing under Jupiter's gravity. In that split second afterwards, all I could hear was breathing, but I was not sure whose it was. I heard Dudley whisper, eloquence. It was the word he was trying to say when we were attacked. It was the last word he ever spoke. And first time, I shall read a little bit in the middle. Sort of hints of time travel and all sorts of stuff. So they're not obviously embodied in Hampstead. But I'll read the bit where, in which the author is surprised by his affection for early Pink Floyd. This is what happens when you write science fiction stories in the middle of the night. So the ship's been hit by the Dominicans. Slight allegory there. And our hero has to go and do something to the spaceship, which is slightly, well, I'll read it anyway. So, in this most desperate of escapes, I had to now show my love in the most obvious way. The ship's called the Thea, by the way. Such is the nature of Thea that she could transform human bodily fluids into the fuel she needed to keep us speeding on our way, further towards the deep field. She knew about Mouse and I. Mouse is a sort of tank girl-like pilot of the ship. So the goggles and headset showed me virtual mouses. Sometimes, when I had to do this before, I've had images come up from the past, E in particular. We met in 1967 when I was working at the British Library. I was 24, she was 16. Well, nearly. She'd run away from the family home in Cambridge and was in the big city, big time, discovering all life had to offer. She discovered me, and soon we were offering each other all we had. Her laugh was infectious, her tits were amazing, and she introduced me to Pink Floyd. We went to the 14-hour Technicolor Dream at Ali Pali. Things were never the same again. Reality had shifted. In retrospect, this was good grounding for my later training with Sethian mystics and teachers. After all, E had given me plenty of experience when it came to altered states of consciousness. You might say it's become my one true calling. But now, in my goggles, it was Mouse. There she was in all her shaven, pierced and tattooed glory. The blast goggles beamed into me the feelings I needed to give Thea what she wanted. I eased myself into one of her tenderly mouths, and she had all of me. I'm sure at that moment I could hear a woman singing somewhere softly. So after that loving encounter with his spaceship, he goes back to his room and falls asleep. So this is the second part of that. I was tired after my encounter with Thea, and made my way back to my room. I recalled my former life centuries ago, before we slipped down the rabbit holes of time, and what it was like to be with someone, E. And then these bastards on the Thea introduced themselves to me, telling me I was a chosen one of the great race of Seth. I'd been helping organise a conference on the Dead Sea Scrolls and heretical religions at the British Library in 1968, when the very people we're talking about showed up in a spaceship. I seriously thought Sid Barrett was probably saner than I was at that point. Was there something in the water, or something in me? And that was the last I saw of London. To be honest, I was glad to be out of the place, although I did miss E. Christ almighty. I told them I needed her, ranted and raved about love and sex and drugs. They told me I had religious potential and put me in one of their sleep pods. I spent months, or was it only days, in a weird country house in Sussex, Runhill Court. They trained me there. I met Dudley and forgot for the time being about E. I slept and dreamed of the crazy times. There were times we weren't travelling, making necessary pit stops to overhaul fear or raising funds to carry on. This was where the Count, who's another crew member, vaguely modelled on D-Day from Animal House, if anybody remembers that. There was the Count, who came into his own as a buccaneer, swindling and defrauding as he went, cutting a lucrative swathe across 50 galaxies. In my dream, he had a peg leg and an eye patch, just like a real pirate on the Spanish Main. Mouse, our other loosest cannon, had spent time running an ice bar on Andromeda for off-world entrepreneurs. In reality, it was a high-class clip joint making 1 million clicks a month from her girls. The dream showed her working shows on feel-good ships running high-pressure booze cruises through Jupiter's Atmos 1,000 miles down. I saw her ship heading through the Great Red Spot. Mouse was wearing a party hat, loving the maelstrom outside as if it were nothing more than a high tide in autumn. And then she turned into E, peachy, free in a Cambridge April, smiling with those big dark eyes, and all around us the doll's house darkness of Sid Barrett, and he's whispering to us, set the controls for the heart of the sun. Thank you.